WBAP, Fort Worth, Dallas, Texas. Hi, everybody. Welcome now to the Bill Mack All-Night Country Show. Man, we got a big show for you tonight. Just an hour long, but we'll be around here till 12 o'clock midnight. That's Central Standard Time. And we hope you'll stick around with us for the finest in country music, heard coast to coast.
On Saturday, February the 16th, 1974, in Fort Worth, Texas, Carla Walker, aged 17, and her boyfriend Rodney McCoy attended a high school Valentine's dance at Western Hills High School. After enjoying a night amongst friends, they decided to continue in each other's company with another couple. Subsequent to dropping the pair of friends off at their destination, Rodney and Carla drove over to the Ridgely Brunswick bowling alley in order to use the restrooms. It had gone past midnight when the couple returned to the 1969 Ford LTD, which was parked in a badly lit lot at the back of the bowling alley. The couple talked and drank some alcohol while Carla had her back to the front passenger door and was turned in the direction of Rodney. Unexpectedly, the front passenger door was wrenched open with such a force that Carla fell back into the parking lot. Rodney, seeing this, moved instantly towards his girlfriend in a vain attempt to help her. As he did so, he took a number of heavy knocks to his head. He had managed to get a grip of Carla in the initial stages, but the blows disorientated him and the hold he had was lost. The man responsible for pulling the door open now had Carla and would utter the words,
"You're coming with me, sweetheart."
On hearing this, Rodney looked up from his dazed state to see a pistol pointed directly at his face. The trigger was pulled, but it was a misfire. The would-be killer attempted several more times. Nothing could be heard but the repeated sound of clicks. Unable to fire, he pistol-whipped Rodney a number of times before Carla screamed for him to stop in exchange for her cooperation. On hearing Carla's remonstrations, Rodney looked up and the pair looked each other in the eyes. The final words to leave her mouth were, and I quote, "Go get my dad." For a time, Rodney lost consciousness. When he woke up, both Carla and the man were gone. Blood-soaked and confused, he walked around the car park in search of his girlfriend. The only item of hers he retrieved was the purse Carla had been using as a headrest when leaning her head against the passenger window. Realising she was long gone, he gets in his car and heads directly for Carla's house. He knocked at the door, which was soon answered by Carla's older sister, Cynthia. He screams, and I quote, "They took her, they took her." An ambulance was called for Rodney, as were the police, and Carla's father went directly to the car park in a frantic attempt to gain some inkling of where his daughter might have been taken after the violent encounter. Rodney described the man as someone who was about 20 years old. He had short wavy hair, had a Texas accent, and was attired in a green sleeveless vest and a white cowboy hat. For 3 days, police and local volunteers searched for the missing teenager. Answers as to the location of the girl would come when Fort Worth police officer Darrell Thompson discovered her remains in a culvert near Lake Benbrook, 18 miles from where she was last seen. Police were able to find a magazine for a .22 caliber Ruger pistol at the abduction site. However, nothing else indicating the possible identity of the kidnapper and killer could be found. The autopsy would reveal she had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled. She had also been injected with morphine. Authorities were aware that morphine was hard to acquire, and they played with the possibility that the person responsible had a background in medicine. Early on in the investigation, one of the detectives, Din Mitter, pointed to similarities between the murder of Walker and another girl, Becky Martin. They shared some physical characteristics. Both were petite and strikingly pretty, and the murder of Becky had only occurred the year earlier at a college in South Texas. Her remains would be found in a culvert also. In later years, another 2 girls were named as possible victims of the same killer. We will look at these in the concluding stage of the video. Police thoroughly searched the area for any evidence that might be available. They managed to locate a promise ring given to her by Rodney, but nothing else of interest was discovered. Her underwear was not on her or near the body. She was heavily bruised around her head, face, neck, knees and thighs. Scrapes were also on her chin, hands, elbows and knees. The cause of death was due to asphyxiation by strangulation. It was also determined that she had been sexually assaulted. Pubic hair and semen belonging to an unknown person were also found during the autopsy. A number of persons of interest came to the fore over the weeks, months and years. One person called a hotline that was set up in the aftermath of the killing. He was described as being nervous and edgy. Unfortunately, he ended the call, and though appeals were made for him to call back, he never did. Press in Fort Worth also received a letter giving certain details described by some as pertinent. Once again, an appeal was made for the sender to contact them. He never did. One person police took a close look at was Tommy Ray Neeland. Neeland had abducted a girl from a secluded and heavily wooded area as she was waiting to collect her brother and his friend who were in the area for target practice. Like the man who kidnapped Carla, he threatened the girl while she was in her car with a firearm, in this case a 12-gauge shotgun. The girl was then walked to his pickup truck and driven away. He covered her mouth with tape used for carpeting. As she attempted to speak, he removed the tape and lost temporary control of the car. Fortunately for the girl, it got stuck and he was forced to free her, and she subsequently contacted police. A piece of sandpaper used for tiling was the only clue found at the scene, and this would eventually lead police to 25-year-old Neeland. During questioning, he confessed to a number of crimes that would lead police to ponder the possibility that he was involved in the death of Carla Walker. Neeland admitted to killing Nancy Mitchell in 1970 and hitchhikers Mary Jane Handy and Robert Golson in 1972. When police questioned him, he knew a good deal about the case because, according to him, he had been reading the papers. Police decided to give him a polygraph test. He failed the first one, and 2 further tests proved inconclusive. Rodney McCoy, Carla's boyfriend, also picked him out from a lineup. However, 2 youths from a church that Neeland attended provided an alibi for his whereabouts on the night that Carla was taken. In the end, police cleared him. When he was prosecuted, he received 550 years for the death of Mitchell, Handy and Golson. The list of suspects that police had over the years grew and grew. At times, individuals tied to the case believed they knew with certainty who the man responsible was. As with a lot of well-known cases which go unsolved for so long, people inserted themselves into the case, while classmates and Carla's boyfriend Rodney had the finger of many pointed at them. All of the suspicions which surrounded the question as to who was responsible dissolved when an arrest was made. It turned out to be a man who was interviewed during the initial stages of the investigation. Since that initial interview, he simply went under the radar. On Monday, September 21st, 2020, Fort Worth police made an arrest in the Carla Walker case. Glenn Samuel McCurley was charged with capital murder 46 years after Carla's body had been found. Investigators did have a partial DNA profile of the killer, but they could never link it to anyone in particular. That changed when in March 2020, they obtained a more detailed profile using the most up-to-date technology. They entered the profile into CODIS, the combined DNA index system, but nothing came of it. Police then sent the profile off to Othram Incorporated. They would use genetic genealogy to provide investigators with the surname McCurley. Detective Bennett, who had been actively investigating the cold case, recognised the name when mentioned. Glenn McCurley had been interviewed by police on April 3rd, 1974. He was 31 at the time. Police interviewed him because he was one of 22 people who owned a registered Ruger pistol, the firearm used in the abduction of Carla. During the interview, he told police that the gun had been stolen 6 weeks prior. This would have been around the time that Carla had been killed. This was the only Ruger pistol that police could not account for. Additionally, McCurley lived a mile from the site of the abduction. He was also off work, and his wife was out of town on that particular weekend. Those investigators leading the case in 1974 believed McCurley to be a good suspect, but they couldn't take the circumstantial evidence gathered any further because they lacked the technological capabilities needed to proceed. In 2020, they had everything they needed. As we know, they couldn't find the profile in CODIS, so they went directly to his house and rifled through his trash. There, police obtained a number of items for analysis. One of these items was a McDonald's straw which contained DNA. There was a profile hit. Police would go to the McCurley household and ask for a voluntary sample from their prime suspect. He complied, and within a short time, they had what they needed to advance a case that had been stalled for 46 years. On the first day of trial at the Tarrant County Court, prosecutors laid out the charges against McCurley. Rodney McCoy would testify about the events of that night and the enduring pain and suspicion that lay over him while the case went unsolved. The second day saw a videoed interview between investigators and the accused. Initially, he denied any involvement in the kidnap, assault, rape and murder of Carla. But at a certain point in the interview, he can be heard saying,
"I choked her to death, I guess."
He told police that he had been out drinking beer and whiskey on the night of the kidnapping. Fatefully, he parked up in the same car park as Rodney and Carla. According to him, he heard Carla screaming at Rodney, so he proceeded over to the car to help. After a quote tussle unquote with Rodney, he got her out of the car and took her away from the scene. He states that all was well at first, but the situation turned violent when he made a drunken advance on her. This initiated, according to him, the set of events that led to her rape and murder. The defence countered the prosecution's use of the confession by saying it had been obtained from an elderly and ailed man under duress. The third day would see a reversal. Glenn McCurley confessed to the murder. It was not long after that the family of Carla finally got to lay out what they thought. Carla's sister, Cindy Stone, would say, and I quote, "I wished you had done this a long time ago," unquote. She also asked McCurley to come forward if he had committed similar acts which so far had gone unsolved. Rodney McCoy would tell the press that a tormenting cloud of suspicion had laid over him for 47 years.
He hung a cloud of suspicion on me for all those years. I mean, that's torment. I just felt I let Mr. Walker down. His little flower, that's what he take care of my little flower.
McCurley was wheeled away to begin his life sentence as innocent members of both families embraced. This was a day for reflection. A day on which answers were partially given with regards to the events of that night. Unfortunately, though he confessed to the crime, Glenn McCurley still holds to the absurd story that he was at first acting as a knight in shining armour. We all know this to be nonsense. However, we also know that a man that could take away the life of a young, beautiful and loved girl with her whole life ahead of her could well be responsible for other unsolved homicides. Tarrant County Assistant Criminal District Attorney Emily Dixon would state that McCurley's attack against Carla and Rodney did not seem to be the work of a novice. One aspect of the killing that was highlighted by Jim Walker, brother of Carla, was that the night on which McCurley went hunting, February 16th, 1974, was his 11th wedding anniversary. Over the years, a number of unsolved murders took place in the month of February. They have become known to the press as the February slayings. In February 1973, Becky Martin, aged 21, had been married to her husband David for 4 years and had a 2-year-old daughter. She was a waitress and was taking night classes at Tarrant County Junior College, now Tarrant County Community College. On February 7th, 1973, Becky went to the college for a scheduled English exam. She completed it early and left the campus at approximately 8:30 p.m. When she hadn't arrived home by 10 p.m, her husband David grew concerned that she may have been experiencing problems with her car and went out in search of his wife with his young daughter. When he got to the college campus car park, he went in search of his wife's car and finally came across it. The driver door was ajar and muddy footprints and spatters were clearly discernible on the door. Books and papers were chaotically scattered on the floor of the back seat. No keys were there, but on using his own set, he started the car. Shortly thereafter, he called the police. 7 weeks after the disappearance of Becky Martin, a man by the name of James Edward Anguish stopped his car near a culvert on Cattle Barron Road so that 2 female acquaintances could relieve themselves in a secluded area. On heading down into the culvert, they came across a decomposed body that would later turn out to be Becky. In the intervening years, similarities between her murder and the murder of Carla have been pointed to. Like Carla Walker, Becky was small. She was kidnapped from a vehicle. The kidnappings took place in February, and she had been found in a culvert in a rural area of Tarrant County, outside Fort Worth city limits. Due to decomposition, authorities were unable to determine her cause of death. On February 19, 1977, June Mulder Ward, aged 25, a vocational nursing student, was discovered dead in the 1000 block of Fuller Street near the Federal Record Centre. It appeared as though she had experienced car difficulties close to a car park. In her car, police found jumper cables and ladies' shoes. It was presumed that after experiencing trouble, she left her car in search of assistance. When her remains were found, she had been heavily mutilated, and the cause of death was strangulation. A piece of a bra was found around her neck, and she had sustained injuries to her head that were determined to have been inflicted by an axe or hatchet. These injuries were sustained post-mortem. June was small, and though there was no evidence that she was sexually assaulted, it's believed that this was the motivation, and it's been stated that semen was found on or near her remains. She had clearly put up a fight, as all the fingers in her right hand were broken. This may have dissuaded the perpetrator from carrying out the assault while she was alive. However, it does appear as though a sexual act of some kind was carried out after. Christy Towers, aged 26, from London, Ontario, Canada, had moved to Odessa, Texas in 1980 to live with her sister. In 1983, she got a job as a waitress at the world's biggest honky-tonk, Billy Bob's in Fort Worth, and was working there for 3 weeks when on the night of February 3rd, she clocked in for work. At 2:30 a.m. on the 4th, she finished work and headed for her Chevy Impaler. Christy was last seen by a fellow Billy Bob's employee who seen a man approach her and then begin arguing with her. After this sighting, she disappeared. 2.5 months later, on April 20th, 1983, her remains were discovered by employees of a landscaping crew who were removing garbage from a field. Her body was in a decomposed state and had been covered by rocks and various other debris. Her hands had been bound behind her back with electrical wire. Another wire had been twisted around her neck. Authorities never stated whether Christy had been raped. A composite sketch was drawn up with the aid of the last person to see Christy in Billy Bob's car park. He was described as standing 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighing approximately 235 pounds. He had blonde unkempt hair, blue eyes and a beard. The hair and eyes don't match Samuel McCurley. The height and weight do. Another reason why McCurley appears to be a good suspect for Christy's murder is because when she was missing, a couple came across her purse and used her checkbook to purchase items and obtain cash using it. They found it in a dumpster close to a bar called Cheers in West Fort Worth, 20 miles away from the location in North Fort Worth where her body was later found. The quickest route from where her body was discovered to a place called Mark's Place would take you past the bar Cheers. Glenn McCurley lived in Mark's Place in 1983 and was still living at this address when he was arrested. She also shared certain characteristics with Carla. She was blonde and petite. The last female some have linked as a possible victim of McCurley is Hillside Jane Doe. She was found on February 24, 1986, near Hillside Park in Fort Worth. The woman was estimated to be in her late 30s. She was 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighed approximately 120 pounds. The woman was nude and died as a result of strangulation. Other women have been suggested as possible victims of McCurley. Most of these died outside the February timeframes, but were murdered, sexually assaulted, or presumed to have been sexually assaulted. If you wish to look into these slayings in more detail, we have attached a link in the description box to the Gone Cold podcast, which has done an excellent job of covering the Carla Walker case and the murders possibly linked to Glenn McCurley. If you have time, we highly advise listening to them. Once again, we have a case that lay too long unanswered. Fortuitously, the living members of Carla's family and friends received answers. However, many are still waiting to find out why their loved ones were taken away in the prime of their life. We can only hope that more investigators, with the aid of modern technology, will take on these cold cases so as to raise the chances of providing closure to the families that have gone without it for so long.